Hello, thank you all for joining. Welcome to our Smiley Talk, What Women Want. So we're going to be looking at the world of work with women, the representation that they don't have, that they need to have, and also how we can inspire positive change to help them help us reduce inequalities when it comes to women and the world of work. So it was International Women's Day yesterday, and I'm really happy that we are carrying on having these conversations. We have 4 fantastic speakers with us today, which I'm really happy about. We have Marcia, Michelle, Dina, and Charlie, and there is the opportunity to hear from them and what they do shortly. But just before that, a little introduction from me. So I am Amy, the editor at Smiley Movement. We are a non-profit sponsored by the original Smiley brand, and everything we do has the aim to inspire people to drive positive change in the world. So we run these Smiley Talks. We talk about issues and the solutions and positive actions that people can take. We also have our daily source of Smiley news, and we have an inspiring podcast called Define Optimism. But a thread that aligns everything together is that we align with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So UN Goal 5 is gender equality. It was International Women's Day yesterday, so it is a great time to do this talk. So we are live streaming on Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments and we will get to them near the end of the hour. But I'm going to stop talking now and head over to our panelists. So I'm going to come to you first, Marcia. Did you want to tell us a bit about who you are and the organisation you work for?
Thank you. Happy belated International Women's Day, Amy. It's my pleasure
You
to
too.
be with you today. So Marcia, I'm Marcia, and I'm the CEO of a charity based in Birmingham called WAITS. It stands for Women Acting in Today's Society. We're almost 30 years old. We started way back in 1993 with a view to empower women, to help women to have a voice in society. Fast forward, we now deliver some key services for women who suffer domestic abuse, and those services are advocacy support. We also provide counselling and therapeutic workshops to help women. We also have refuge and support women into employment.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I thought I noticed a Birmingham accent there, and then you said it. Michelle, what about you? Could you introduce yourself and what you do?
Thank you, Amy. Thank you ever so much for inviting me on today. So my name's Michelle Minikin. I am a chartered psychologist and coached. I am based up in Newcastle upon Tyne. I'm an army brat, so I don't have an accent, sadly. I spent my career in corporates doing recruitment, coaching, learning and development, and I got a bit fed up with the crimes being committed against employees. I suffered greatly in corporates myself. So I did what most psychologists do when they decide to go and work for themselves and set a proper professional psychology practice. That was back in 2016. And it just wasn't me, because that professionalism I equate with masking. So 2 things happened. I read a book called Be More Pirate by a chap called Sam Conniff, and I also found out after years of wondering what was wrong with me that I had ADHD, and then the world suddenly made sense. So we closed the boring business psychology practice down, started a company called Work Pirates, and I'm not going to swear today, but we are on a mission to un-F work. So helping organisations and humans rewrite the rules and start their own mutinies. And because I, don't have a lot of time to do other things, I'm writing a book at the moment called Good Girl Deprogramming, which is coming out in September. So that's very exciting.
Fantastic. I feel like you will have a lot of insights to share across all of those things. Dina, I'll come to you next. Did you want to introduce yourself and tell us about where you work?
Hi, my name is Dina Musinda Rezo. I work with a charity that is registered in the UK and based in the UK in terms of office, called Womankind Worldwide. So Womankind Worldwide is an international feminist organization based in the UK, but working with women's rights groups, organizations, and movements across in Africa, but also in Asia. We focus on 5 countries: 1 Kenya, 2nd Uganda, 3rd Ethiopia, 4th Zimbabwe, and 5th Nepal. Our work we center movement strengthening and movement building, because we really do believe that change happens when women work collaboratively together, and that's when they have more power to influence decisions that impact on them, but also are able to draw support from each other.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Charlie, coming to you last, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about where you work?
Absolutely. I'm Charlie, CEO and co-founder of the Girls Network, and we are a mentoring charity working with 14 to 19-year-old girls from the least advantaged communities around the country. So we match them one-to-one with professional women who act as a mentor for a year. And the aim is to build confidence, develop skills, but also to open up networks and opportunities that the girls otherwise might not have access to, really with the aim of helping them to be ambitious for their futures, whatever it is that they're passionate about, whatever they aspire to, and then supporting them to realize those ambitions. So we currently work with about 1,400 girls around England, all across the country. Having started back in 2013 with just 30 girls. At the end of that mentoring program, the girls then become part of our ambassador community. And the aim is that we can continue to support them, provide them a network of women and girls to champion them, advise them. And one day we want those girls to come back and be mentors themselves for the next generation. So that's what we do.
I bet it's amazing. Have you had women, have you had girls come back to be mentors? That must be an amazing feeling.
So we're 9 years old now. We have just had 2 girls sign up to be mentors, and we've actually employed one of our ambassadors as well. So she was in one of the first cohorts, and now she works in our team. So that's been really exciting to see that cycle sort of come back and complete.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much. So to kick things off, I wanted to start by discussing what women have achieved in the past 10 years. So there are a lot of inequalities present. There are gaps. There's a lot that needs to change. But if we look back in terms of women and work, and over the past 10 years in terms of their employment, what would you say are some of the successes we have potentially had? Now, I just wanted to, this week, obviously, it's International Women's Day. I've had a lot of emails in my inbox, and I wrote down a couple of them because I thought it was interesting. So one said the most recent UK employment statistics show that 9 out of 12 regions experienced an annual decrease in female unemployment, which is good. Another said that the UK is apparently among the 10 best countries for women to work in Europe. Now, I'm sure a lot of people would have different views on this, but there were a lot of positive emails coming through my inbox, and it's a tricky situation because there is a lot that still needs to be done, but things have been achieved. So sort of focusing on what has been achieved for women in the past 10 years. Marcia, maybe I'll come to you first. What would you say is something that you think there have been steps or progress in when it comes to women at work?
All right, Amy, unfortunately, I answered that first question wrong. So I failed at the first hurdle. I talked about what I think hasn't happened over the last 10 years.
We are gonna go into what hasn't happened, what needs to happen.
Just listening to some of those statistics that you just gave kind of got me to think. And I think one of the good progresses that we've made is the domestic abuse bill that came in 2021. Which hope it gives more powers to support women going through domestic abuse, and also more powers to the court as well as the police. And I think for women, when we're thinking about justice for women and women's safety, that's a really good gain, I think, that's come in over the last 10 years.
Yeah. And Charlie, what would you say when it comes to, obviously you've worked in the Girls Network for the past 9 years. What changes have you seen?
So I suppose one thing that really strikes me is representation of women on boards. Obviously we're still not 50-50, but I think we're around about 39-40% now. So it's been a big step up. And that I think has been really important. We know that if we have people in positions of power and influence, representative of those they serve, then we're making better decisions. I guess from a young person's point of view, which is where I've certainly had the most exposure, what I think we've seen is more conversations and more acknowledgement of what the challenges are, more space to have those conversations. we saw the Everyone's Invited movement. Obviously, that was really shocking. But actually, the fact that there was a space for all young people, but a lot of girls and young women in particular, to share the experiences they were having, I think was a real step forward in acknowledging the challenges that are there, and not being able to ignore them. I think we've therefore seen a lot of changes, organisations stepping forward to support policy changes as well, where it's been unignorable. This is what's going on, and we need to do something to support girls and young women. I think the other thing we've seen is increasingly more female role models. I think we've still got a way to go in terms of diversity, but we are seeing more women in different positions of power now. And I think that's been really exciting. And we're certainly hearing from our network of young women that they are seeing more women like them doing things they aspire to. So that's definitely a step in the right direction.
It must be really great to have hear from those young people who are that generation growing up before potentially reaching work, and knowing that they are noticing differences and things changing, but also about what you said about people talking and acknowledging things. That is very true, and we need it to translate into action. But I would definitely say, from when my career started just over 10 years ago, that wasn't spoken about, and now through the years it definitely increases.
Absolutely. And I think it just fills me with so much hope. I've literally just been sitting on a panel with 4 of our young people, and hearing them talk about their ambitions for not just themselves, but actually the world they live in, has been really inspiring. They're really switched on, and they are really driven to make a difference. So, a lot of tough stuff is going on at the moment, but I think, there are lots of reasons to be hopeful for the future.
Definitely. And coming to you, Michelle, Work Pirates. Since you've launched Work Pirates, and potentially the discussions of women in work and sort of their role, has that changed much for you in your own experience?
I find it fascinating. So we work with people in the States as well, and we really don't have a lot to complain about compared to those guys over there. The protections that we have and we almost take for granted are so grateful for, to be fair. But yeah, I think the two things that really struck me when I got these questions through was one about pay transparency. So even now you still see, so most job adverts don't have salaries on, but people can now look at organizations they're looking to join to see what the gender pay gap looks like. So I find that really fascinating. I spent a lot of yesterday giggling along on Twitter to the gender pay gap bot. If anyone's seen that,
I did.
it was astounding, and just watching organizations panic and delete their tweets as well. It's instead of engaging with it. So I found that really interesting. And the other thing is the Me Too stuff. It's less behind closed doors, but we've still got a long way to come with the whole people signing NDAs and things, and women or humans being silenced around that. So they're the two big ones, I think.
And it comes back to that sort of acknowledgement and discussion, like Charlie was saying, when you're talking about the Me Too movement, like you said, there is still a long way to go, but there is the acknowledgement, there's the discussion, there's the awareness, and it's a starting point. And Dina, coming to you, so thinking about sort of working with women and the past 10 years, what would you say in terms of what women have achieved and what progress there has been when it comes to work and employment?
Yeah, thank you. So for me, I think I'll start from, because we work mainly at the international and regional level, but also support partners in specific countries, as I say, Africa and Asia. So for me, the first gain that I've seen in terms of progress is the existence of international laws and policies, but also the same really progressive policies at the regional level that have also been adopted at the country level. And I think international laws and policies and also regional ones are extremely important because they do provide standards for protecting the rights of women at the country level and in different communities. But also then different actors can use those laws to call and demand for the human rights and the services that women oftentimes lack. And so for me, that is like a big gain. And I can point out, so for example, you already mentioned the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. That's a strong gain that, many actors are rallying around to advance gender equality and women's rights. But also the recent one, which is the International Labour Organization Convention 190, which was adopted about 2 years ago and specifically was put in place to protect women from harassment, violence, and abuse in the world of work. We know that we have been really advocating and pushing for women to participate in labor market. But when they get to the labor market, one, the environment is not conducive for them because of, whether it is sexual violence or violence in general, but also lack of laws that protect them in terms of equal pay for work of equal value. Those are issues that we are still having. But then again, around the ILO Convention 190 really gives us hope in terms of ensuring that when women do go to work, are safe and they are protected. But also, like I was saying, we have seen really, in terms of progress, stronger social movements, including women's movements. And Michelle already talked about the Me Too movement, but also really other movements at the country level, at the regional level. So, for example, Fees Must Fall, which was a strong movement in South Africa, which was advocating for quality and accessible education that is affordable to everyone. And so I wouldn't really end this question without mentioning the important role of movements and social movements. And I think we've seen that especially during COVID and how important it is to bring about change, but also to really support each other.
Yeah, and I think Marcia mentioned it at the beginning about women coming together, and my colleague reminded me earlier of the hashtag Empowered Women Empower Women. I just feel like it's a thread that I always read that and just think, oh yes, but it's a thread that runs through a lot of this, isn't it? So sort of focusing, so we've looked at the past and focusing in, I mean, it's 2022, inequalities are still very much present. What would you want to focus on, or you, in terms of the people you work with, your organizations and your experiences, what would you want to focus on in 2022 if we got given a wand and were told, what do you want to achieve, to help women achieve this year in the world of work? Would it be would it be more awareness? Would it be equal pay? If you could sort of focus on one thing to drive forward, what would that be? I'll come to you, Marcia. Is there something specifically that you think we really need to drive this forward when it comes to pushing forward change?
Oh, yes, definitely. I think, the Equality Bill came in 2010, but as there isn't been a lot of movement, there has been some strides, but we haven't got full parity yet. So for me, the sort of things that I'd want to focus on would be things to support women in work who are going through domestic abuse, particularly around the accessing justice. A lot of women tend to be in part-time roles or low-paid roles. We've mentioned the gender gap, pay gap already. So a lot of women don't get the same pay as men. And this translates if you're actually going through a relationship problem, seeking divorce and need support from the legal justice system. Legal aid is not available in certain areas. So for example, if you were going through course and you need to sort out child custody arrangements, legal aid is not provided there. It's not provided in employment tribunals either. So if you think that women would need to access these legal support, but then would have the barrier of being able to do it because they cannot afford the cost of a solicitor. So that's the thing, is a huge barrier for women, and particularly women in work as well. The other thing that I'd wanted to mention was about the resourcing of the women sector in general. many years ago, you may remember having local women's centres where women could go build their confidence, learn English if English is a second language, and get support to get into work. Those things have diminished over the years. There's very few women's centres. And my final thing that I'd like to campaign, I know you only asked me one.
No, we want to talk about them all.
The final thing I'd like to campaign on is better childcare, because to enable more women to get into work and come off benefits and be more economical viable. So those would be my things that I would want to campaign on this year.
It's hard to pick one, isn't it? Because just that your last point about childcare, the motherhood penalty is huge. It's a huge issue holding women back. I remember seeing it was a sort of animation once, and it showed two people, a couple who both went to law school, and it showed how they rose in terms of like the progression in their career together. And she stepped out to have a child, and then so he rose, and when she came back in, and then she had to keep going out for school plays or parents' evenings, so she kept stepping out, and then they ended up with a huge gap. And I think for me, seeing that visually was you know about it and you hear about it. I'm not a mother, but seeing that sort of illustration makes you think this is what so many women are experiencing now. It's what so many women will experience. It's a huge thing to tackle. And you see women talking about it and saying, we need to sort out the childcare issue. I can't afford to send my child to be looked after, and so I can't go to work. And it's one of those things where people are talking about it and we need action. So I agree with all of them. Obviously.
What you said there, Amy, also sparked another issue, I think, for women. A few years ago, I was talking to one of our hospital trusts, and there was 2 female gynecologists, the rest were all male. And my question was, why have we got more female gynecologists? Because then surely women would access gynecological support much more. And it was the same thing that she said, women train as doctors and they progress, but then they step out to have children right at the time when men are thinking about becoming consultants. And therefore, like you said, the school run, the progression means that the women stay stuck and the men progress and be consultants. So we, in order for us to have more women in those areas in particular, I think we need to be looking at the childcare as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because that's the animation I saw on Twitter in a real life situation. Obviously, it's in so many real life situations. That's just gynecology as an example. But it's really important to address and keep talking about. Michelle, what would you say? What would your, if you were in 2022, we want to push forward or campaign for something in particular, what would you want to focus on, or in terms of people that you work with? Are there other issues that come up?
I think underlying that childcare issue is the fact that women globally, according to Oxfam, that they do 3 times the amount of unpaid care and domestic work than men, which keeps us all really tired. So when it's, when you've got the opportunity to apply for the consultant role as a gynecologist, you're just too tired because you are looking after children, you're looking after your parents, you're keeping households. So so the monetary value, according to Oxfam again, is at least $10.3 trillion every year, which is 3 times the size of the world's tech industry in terms of unpaid labor that women perform. So that's I think a lot of this underlying stuff is tackling that.
Yeah. And
frankly,
knowing the ways to do it. I keep coming back to that acknowledgement and awareness. It's good, and we have got that, and we learn, even learning stats about that, for some people it fires them up, and then it's like, what can we do? I know there's, when these surveys come out and then you see so many people talking about, well, I've done X amount of work unpaid, or then it's just that frustration, isn't it? But really important to address, and like you said, ties into childcare and motherhood, which is just a massive factor. It can't be ignored when it comes to employment.
No, and I feel like I'm doing my part. I've got a 12-year-old son who irons because I refuse, and he does all of his bedroom stuff. He does the hoovering, the dusting, the cleaning, stripping beds, putting, so my job as a parent is to raise an independent man who doesn't rely on a mummy / girlfriend / boyfriend or wherever he goes, to look after him when he grows up. And even looking at my brother and the mollycoddling he gets, and my dad when my gran was still alive, it's just like all the women are fuss around them. It's like, nope, I refuse. So it sort of stops here with me.
Yeah. Charlie, what would you say, reaching out into the what you want to achieve and like working with young girls, are there things that you feel passionate about campaigning for or working on or striving for this year?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing that I'll just pick up on that sort of touches on what Michelle was talking about particularly is recognizing that gender equality is good for everybody. I heard a really quite depressing statistic on Monday from the Global Institute of Women Leadership and Ipsos Mori, which found that 47% of people surveyed internationally believe that we have gone far enough when it comes to providing women rights.
Wow.
And that
47 was that
47%. And if you think that this is people that are willing to share their opinion, arguably this is the best scenario. It's a fascinating read, but quite depressing. But to me, one of the things that stood out is actually it feels like there's a pushback and a backlash. And there are other statistics in there about the number of men and women that feel like men are now losing out. And actually, I think we need to be moving from it being a women-only issue, which I know many people are, to it being a societal issue. It's actually better for everybody if we have equality. So that to me is a really important thing. How do we meaningfully work with, engage with, collaborate with everybody, not just women and girls? I think the second thing for me, and from a sort of young person point of view, something that we're really looking at is how can we create meaningful opportunities for the voices and experiences of the young women that we work with to be heard and to affect change. So we last year piloted a girl-led mentoring program where we matched some of the young women that have been through our mentoring program with senior leaders in key organizations to mentor them. So that those people in positions of power who are making decisions, who had influence over their organizations and arguably wider in society, could learn from these young women, and the young women's ideas and experiences would actually feed into and affect the decisions that were being made. That leader had a broader view on the world, had different lenses through which to look at the decisions they were making, and would arguably make better decisions because of it. So I think it's really important thinking about how can we do that? How can we meaningfully hear from young women and girls, arguably all young people, but particularly young women and girls, those that often aren't heard. I said earlier, we work with girls from the least advantaged communities. So those voices we don't hear, how can they be heard in a meaningful way so we can disrupt that flow of power?
But you're completely right about having those people in power having that lens, because they don't know everything just because of where they've got, but having the lens to know from people from different communities, different ages. And arguably the Gen Z sort of population, I'm not sure the ages of the women that were matched with those leaders, but that Gen Z population, I'm constantly in awe of them and how passionate they are and how consistently they want to drive forward change in so many areas.
Absolutely. And I think it's just shifting our view of what knowledge we value and what experience we value. I think historically, age and position has been deemed to be more valuable and better than anything else. And actually, I think it's about reimagining that and saying, no, it's not better. It's just different. Yes, of course, you've got more experience in some senses. Of course, you can learn from what you've been through. You maybe have more senior connections, but actually there's a huge amount you don't have. And that is equally as valuable. So how can we bring that together and get the best of all of it?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Dina, and coming to you next, it's amazing to have the UK, you have that global perspective with Womankind Worldwide. When it comes to striving for change and what you would like to focus on, what would you say?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think it's such an important question, and really, really timely, because at Womankind, we are just about to launch our new strategy. And so we have been really, really thinking about that question in terms of what can we do that is different, that can add and contribute to change towards women's rights. And for us, we are challenging ourselves to focusing on removing barriers and systems of operation, because we know that oftentimes, because we are constantly in a crisis, in emergencies, we tend to focus on symptoms. And that's really important, because by focusing on that, then women get critical services that are needed immediately. But we also know that we are not going to address gender inequalities by focusing only on symptoms. So we really need to shift and start also focusing more and more on root causes of the experiences, of the bad experiences that women experience. And so we are challenging ourselves to say, okay, what is the system of operation? What system is producing gender inequalities? And we know patriarchy for a very long time, for decades, that, that's the system that especially women's rights organizations and gender equality activists have been focusing on. But we also know that patriarchy doesn't work alone. And so we are also asking ourselves, what are other systems of operation that we need to focus on? And so we're also really digging into things like racism, like capitalism, and really understanding that those systems work together to produce gender inequality that we experience today. Like fellow speakers have spoken about unpaid care, domestic and unpaid care work as an issue that predominantly is done by women. And actually, COVID-19 increased the hours that women spend on unpaid care work, because they were looking for the sick, they were looking for children not going to school. But we need to ask ourselves, why is it that actually women continue to do majority of that work, or majority of that unpaid care work? And the answer is because of the gender roles that we have taught the system, our societies have believed that because you are a woman, you know that the essentialism of really believing you are a woman, therefore you are good at looking after children. We are good at cleaning and cooking. That isn't really backed up by science, but because of simply a system of socialization that keeps women doing majority of the work, that makes women continuously be violated. When we talk about domestic violence or intimate partner violence, it's again because of the patriarchy that is a system that makes men more dominant and control over women's bodies. And so by focusing on really the systems of oppression, like patriarchy, like racism, talking about issues of decolonization. So for us at Womankind, we are really thinking about how do we even shift more power to partners that we work with at the country level, so that they are making more decisions about what they need to work on. Because at the end of it all, for us, the way we see it, those who are at the really, really grassroots working with the communities know best what the solutions would look like. And they just need support, they need facilitation to be able to actually move the needle and bring about change. And so our focus really is going to be around that. How do we challenge systems of oppression, and how do we movements, women's movements?
Yeah, I think it's interesting what you said. Like it is like sort of rewinding back to like, where did this start, and how can we start to rebuild, which obviously is not easy, but it's sort of understanding how to get to that. One thing that has sort of come up a few times is learning about the struggles that women have. And I'll reference the gender pay gap bot, Michelle, that you mentioned earlier. Yesterday, the gender pay gap bot, for those that don't know, it was a bot on Twitter that was calling out organizations for the gender pay gap that they have in their company. And at the beginning of the day, people were sort of obsessed with looking at what's the pay gap at this company. But I did see some people say like it makes you feel bad. It can make people feel quite helpless, and it can be quite overwhelming to hear about a lot of the things that we struggle with, that we're coming up against as women, what would you say? I'm going to come to you, Michelle, because you're a psychologist, but what would you say to women who they really want to join this fight and they want to take positive action, but they feel overwhelmed by potentially how big it could be?
Yes, it is huge, and it's overwhelming. You look at, you just watch the news and you see women being oppressed and have violence everywhere and war and famine, and it's horrible, and you can become really, really overwhelmed. So one of the things I do with my coaching clients is it's to sort of look at the circle of control. So draw 3 concentric circles, one inside of the other. Stuff on the outside, write in the stuff that you can't control at all. So war, famine, pestilence, etc. Politicians. In the middle one, write about the things you can influence. And then in the little circle in the middle, it's the things you actually can impact. And it's focusing your attention on the things you can control and can influence and deal with. But I think number 1 is getting yourself a gang, a crew, some people around you that want to do something, and just do it. Join, start a movement, but just start small. Don't try and fix everything at once. Lots of individual people looking at similar problems and collaborating and sharing best practice. That's how it's going to change. It's not going to change. It's not going to change from the top down. It's going to change from the bottom up, the grassroots stuff. So just get involved.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I wanted to touch on the sort of individual action that men and women can take. Hope, what are there any sort of tactics or techniques that you give to those who might feel overwhelmed with this inequality and imbalance?
Hi, yes, Amy, when Wait started, it started off as a campaign group for women, and I joined at that time, and my role was a community organizer to go out and meet with women and ask them what were the issues that were affecting them, but then supporting them to get other like-minded women together. And then once we formed a sort of women's group, we would then support the women to bring those issues to the policymakers. And that's worked really well for Waits over the years. And we still do that process now. So just like what the other speaker just said, it's about not staying silent. It's about talking to other women, because when we're aware of the issues, then we will find that more and more people are affected. And then we'll be able to then galvanize ourselves and form ourselves into campaign groups to bring about change. But I think the most important bit is around not just talking about our issue and getting people together, but actually bringing it to the attention of the people whose jobs and roles it is to bring about change.
Absolutely, definitely. That's a hugely important step. Charlie, thinking about, do you ever hear from younger people? Is it around 13, the sort of young girls you work with, or is it younger than that?
We start at 14 generally.
Okay. So do you hear from young people about, do they ever have any sort of struggle to think they're coming into an environment where they're already at a disadvantage? Or like you said earlier, are you starting to see that sort of change and hope?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the young women we work with recognize the challenges that are going on around them. They recognize that they may be going into a world where they are going to face additional challenges. And they are very well aware of the wider world that we're in. And that can be really overwhelming at times. And we also therefore see the impact that it has on their mental health and well-being. But the remarkable thing we also see is their entrepreneurial mindset, the creativity, their drive and to do something about it. We've seen lots of the young women in our network set up their own things through lockdown. So where they actually didn't have an opportunity to, for example, do work experience or maybe start the courses they wanted to, they've set up their own businesses, they've set up their own campaigning organizations. There's one girl we work with who set up one about sort of self-image and body image and tackling potentially historic traumas, and how do you support young women in that sense. And then we've seen young women set up broader campaigning organisations or peer mentoring things with their colleagues, friends, communities. So we've seen that real sort of creativity and courage in the face of the challenges that they're facing. And I think that's where my hope comes from. But it's not to underplay how overwhelming some of the things that are going on at the moment are for them, and the impact that we're seeing it have on them.
Yeah. Hearing what I was saying earlier about how I'm in awe of Gen Zers, hearing you say everything about what they're doing and setting things up to help others and achieve change is just amazing that young women are going around doing that and know that, like, at that age that they can.
It's remarkable, I think, the kind of generosity of spirit and the other-mindedness we see. I think the other important thing that comes out, and I think it's sort of what Michelle touched on, is making sure that they have a support network behind them and around them when things do get too much. They've got people to catch them. Someone described it earlier this week as knowing your tribe. Who's your tribe? And your tribe are the people that build you up. Your tribe are not the people that make you cry at the end of the day. Your tribe are not the people that make you question who you are or how you look or what you're trying to do. Yeah. They're those people that support you, that have your back, that encourage you. And I think that's true for young people and for adults. Like knowing who your tribe is, knowing who you can go to when you're having a tough day is so important, because then when you are having that tough day, they're there. You already know who to go to and they can pick you up. And you do the same for them too. So I think that's really important, particularly.
And we've touched on some. I was going to ask about individual action, whether it's men or women. It's not down to the individual. It's not just down to us. It is down to businesses, organisations. There's so many people that are involved in this changing our society to make sure women are treated as equals. But Dina, I'll come to you. When we're thinking about individual action, are there any things that you would advise young women or women to do when it comes to the world of work to sort of help push forward and achieve change?
Yeah, thank you, Amy. I feel like other speakers have touched on this. But basically, I would like to start with a quote by one of my favorite writers called Audre Lorde. I start the quote, open the quotes. Caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it's self-preservation, and that's an act of political warfare. And so just building on that quote, it's really important that for people that work towards making change happen, working on social justice, they work really in difficult circumstances. And it is extremely important that they take time to look after themselves and to do what it is that can sustain them and their energies. I think there's a common saying that you cannot pour from an empty cup. So you must fill your cup so that you are able to support your communities and you are able to really continue the fight for gender equality. But in terms of what individuals can do, individual women or individual girls, really one is to look after your physical and mental health. Yesterday, I was in an International Men's Day event organized by a group of young women, and they had a panel talking about mental health. And it was really heartbreaking to acknowledge that it seems that mental health has been sidelined within the fight for gender equality. It's not something that organizations or individuals really think about because we are so busy doing, and we don't stop. And as a result, then, we really get to bad spaces. And so mental health is extremely important, especially speaking from where I come from Africa. It's an area that is somehow not prioritized or really neglected, and yet extremely important. And so I would encourage that really women think about their mental health just the same way they think about their physical health. Both of them are important, but also self-care and collective care. And I think collective care comes into what others were talking about in terms of, finding your tribe. I really like that term. Like,
Me too.
who is your tribe? How do you make sure that you are creating a circle of sisterhood, of support systems, in terms of, I have people that I know for sure I can rely on, I can run to, I can cry with, and they will support me and they will make me feel better. I think that's extremely important.
I really love what you said about not pouring from an empty cup, because it's true. Because if you want to sort of, I don't know, set up a women's group at work to try and achieve some sort of change, you've got to be in a good place yourself to be able to do that. Otherwise, it might feel draining. So self-care, super important. Michelle, I'm going to come to you. In terms of when it comes to individual action by men, by women, if people are listening to this and thinking, okay, I agree, yes, I'm fired up. Do you have any advice that you would give to people about sort of how they can work towards inspiring this positive change?
Yes, so much. I'm writing a book on it. I think the fact that girls are socialized to help other people, I think underlying that that looking after ourselves first, and I got goose pimples when talked about that being an act of warfare, because we're taught not to. We're taught to look after everybody else. So thank you for another writer that I'm going to go and squirrel away and find out. But it's how we can break that good girl conditioning. How do we stop the shoulds, the musts, the people around you kind of judging you and being worried about being judged for speaking out. But yes, I think I read a book last year, I think it was. It's called Unbound by a lady called Kasia Urbanaic, and she talks about getting these girl gangs together. So my girl gang, we call ourselves creative, mischievous girls, pretty much, and practicing some of those things like asking for what we want, because we're told we're not supposed to ask for what we want, asking for help, identifying what we actually want rather than what we are told by everybody that we should. So that's really helped us, but there is just so much. And my favorite one is having a bad girl role model. So who is it out in the world that's behaving in a bad girl kind of way that you can take bits from, and watch how it's how it lands.
Yeah, one that isn't conforming to the stereotype is I like that idea. I'm going to move on to questions just because we've had quite a few. I don't know if we'll be able to get through them all, but someone has asked, I think it is absolutely true often that empowered women empower women, but other powerful women sometimes also tear women down and knock the ladder from underneath them. How do we win those women over? Does anyone want to take this one? I saw a nod from you, Charlie. I don't want to drop it on you, but is that something you've come across in your work? Not the topic in general.
I think so. I think it's very easy to say, oh, it's only men that are doing this. And we know that at all ages, it's everybody that is policing gender stereotypes. You see it in the classroom, girls and boys, anyone of people of any gender. If you step outside of the gender you're expected to be, you often get ostracized. And then you see that replicated through organizations. If you're a female leader, you're expected to behave in a certain way typically, and be sort of more empathetic and softer. And if you are being more assertive, then you're often called bossy. It's a familiar trope. You hear that and you see female leaders often ostracized for it, or alternatively pushed up, but then not given the space to express that other side of their leadership. So I think there's something really important about leaders, people in positions of power, stepping into the breadth of their leadership and the breadth of their skills. So being soft and emotional and direct and assertive and confident, and demonstrating that one person of any gender can and is all of those things. I think that's really, really important, because I think that enables everybody to feel more confident and secure in their position, in their leadership position, to bring other people up as well. I've certainly had conversations with women in positions of leadership who, and I think it comes from a place of fear sometimes, that actually they are scared to bring other people up because they don't know what that means for them. And that's really not helpful. It doesn't help anybody. And I don't think it's a straightforward thing to solve, but I think beginning to understand some of the mechanisms helps us to start to tackle it.
Yeah, definitely. I see a lot of nods from Michelle and Dina there. Did you want to add anything, Dina?
Yeah, thanks. First of all, just to say that, yes, I do agree with what Shari has said, especially around societal perceptions and gender stereotypes around that, because oftentimes when those things happen in the circles of men, we don't really pay attention. But when a few of those kind of examples happen where women are tearing down other women, then it is exaggerated and seem as though that's actually the majority. For me, I have a lot of experience working with majority of women, diverse women from different countries, from different regions. And my experience tells me that women support other women to a great extent. That is what my experience is. And that's not only women that are my friends. These are women that probably don't know me, but when I needed support, it's women that come to support me. It's not so much the men. And so I really don't agree with that statement. I think it comes from gender biases that sets different standards for women.
You've got your tribe. You've got your tribe. You've got women supporting women. I will just look at so there's another question come through. Someone has said, I work in a male-dominated office and have experienced blatant discrimination for being a woman. How can I approach this without becoming more of a target? Marcia, is this something that you have ever sort of come across in terms of the women you've supported? Is it, what would you say to someone who said that?
Funny enough, I was speaking at an International Women's Conference yesterday, and this very issue came up, and it was a lady talking about her having to change careers because she couldn't cope with this kind of behavior.
Oh, wow.
So I think if you're the only woman there, I think men do have a role as being allies as well, and it's seeking out within your staff colleagues any allies that can support you, that you can kind of point to and say, this is what's happening. I think, it's the hardest thing for women is to challenge in environments like that. And whenever I'm supporting women to do challenge, the first thing is about getting evidence, because when you've got something tangible, it's very hard to argue against it. So for this lady, it would be first gathering the evidence, the incidences, the days and the times that these comments are said and made. And then don't be afraid to take it to a higher level. If it's your line manager that's causing you the problem, go over past that person. But no one should have to go through that in the workplace at all.
No. And it's interesting what you said about men can be allies too, because someone else had asked, can men be feminists? And I think you have also answered that yes, absolutely, they can be feminists. And you need to sort of seek out those people, if in that situation, seek out the men that there are men that want to be part of the conversation and learn and educate themselves. So that was 2-in-1 answers there. Thank you, Marcia. I'm going to go to one more question because we are running out of time. Michelle, I'll come to you because this is something you've touched on, but not necessarily from your personal experience, but in general. Someone has said, I'm the mum of a little boy and a girl. Can you suggest any tips for bringing them up to champion equality and women's rights? I know you mentioned your 12-year-old son does the ironing. Would there be anything else that you would suggest for someone that has a daughter and a son?
I think it's so scary. So I was at a talk yesterday. This week has been like talk. It's
all about the women.
Brilliant. But it's all about if you have a brain, you have bias. And it's an organisation in Newcastle run by 2 girls called Lindsay. It's called 50-50 Futures, and it's all around challenging that stereotype and the gender stereotyping. And it's amazing about even at the blue and pink toys and clothes,
Yeah.
the level of blue and pink, girls have pink stuff, boys have blue stuff. And until we as consumers stop buying the blue and pink stuff, then it's just going to keep going. I think it's even worse now than it was when we were growing up. But yes, I think teamwork, not doing what Theresa May, bless her, said, that girls have girls' jobs in the house and boys have boys' jobs in the house, which made me still cringe years and years later. Don't assign tasks based on gender. It's teamwork in the house. Everybody chips in, everybody helps. It's everybody's responsibility to make sure that X, Y, and Z happen. And it's all about negotiating. But don't listen to those people who would say your child is not allowed to have a pushchair, which I got back because we have lots of girls. All my friends had girls. So all of his little friends growing up were girls, and they had pushchairs and things. I was like, well, dads have pushchairs too. I'm not going to not buy my 3-year-old son a toy pushchair because people are worried about what people think. It's like, Jesus. Yes.
Yeah, no, it's right. And what you said about the blue and pink, I've seen a lot of things before where it's like a boy's t-shirt. It's about not buying them and calling them out, as a lot of people do now. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We have 4 minutes left, so I'm going to whip around all of you and just ask you if there is one thing you wanted talk today, what would it be? Plus, where can people find out a bit more about you and your organization? So Marcia, I'll come to you first. What would you want people to take away, and where can people find out more about you and Weights?
One of the things that I'd like people to take away, and it's something that we've mentioned through the conversation, and number one is don't stay silent. Talk to other women. Build your support circle with women and men who are not afraid to fix your crown, not afraid to give you the support that you need on the days that you feel overwhelmed. So that's my one piece of advice. And if anybody wanted to know more about the services that we run at Weights, please have a look at our website, www.weightsaction.org. We're also on Twitter, and that's @WeightsAction.
Fantastic. Thank you. I feel like we're going to get lots of great snippets of wisdom as we go around this. Michelle, I'm going to come to you next. You're next on my screen. What would you want people to take away, and where can people find out more about you or Work Pirates?
So funny. So I did this preparation before, and I literally wrote exactly what Marcy just said. So don't stay quiet. Yeah, get your coven together, get your gang together, get your crew together, your sisterhood, and just keep talking so they can't ignore you anymore. If you want to find out more about us and Work Pirates, if you go to workpirates.com, it's Work Pirates on all the socials as well. And we are, as I said, on a mission to un-F-word work. And that is a movement that we're starting to help people come together, and together we will actually make a difference. It's not just to rely on me and my partner who run this company. It's the whole community.
Definitely. Fantastic. Thank you. Charlie, what about you? What would your advice be, and where can people find out more, or if they want to get involved in the Girls Network?
We've got similar takeaways here, but mine would also be about conversations, having generous conversations, listening, bringing people in, making sure you're not just having them with women and girls, but the wider community. And remembering to build each other up as well. I think we're quite good at that, but continuing to build each other up. And then I'd also say, consider being a mentor. Think about your role as a role model and a support to others. So we touched on people not being brought up, but thinking about how you can bring up the next generation. And on that note, if you want to find out more about the Girls Network, or if you want to mentor, and we are looking for female mentors across the country, we're at thegirlsnetwork.org.uk. We're at the Girls Net on Instagram and at the Girls Network across the other platforms.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Dina, coming to you, what would you want people to take away from the talk, and where can people find out more about Womankind worldwide?
Thank you very much. I also had building movements and really standing solidarity with others. I think we know that the work of gender equality is too low, it really takes a lot, and for a long time, a lot of energy, and we need each other to be able to win. And so power comes from collectiveness and working together to bring about change. And so the final one is also, I think, at individual levels and institution level, is really to encourage us to also share power. Think about the power you have and how do you share that power with others.
Fantastic. And where can people find out more if they want to know more about Womankind worldwide?
So you can find us on our website, which is www.womankind.org.uk, and you'll find a lot of resources about some of the things that I've touched on and many more.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all very much. That is the end of the hour. Thank you. We've talked a lot about women coming together and supporting other women. So thank you all for coming together and joining us on this talk, giving amazing advice and interesting snippets from your worlds of work too. Thank you all for watching, and you can watch back the full talk on our YouTube channel or at smileymovement.org. Thank you very much.